Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're putting on our film critic hats and turning our analytical lens toward a literal titan of modern animation, Hayao Miyazaki. We all know the breathtaking, magical worlds he creates, right? But today, we're actually looking at the man behind the magic. We're going to examine how his complex, often deeply traumatic childhood profoundly shaped his recurring motifs, specifically his incredibly nuanced depictions of family life. Think about this wild paradox for a second. Here is an artist who vehemently hates war, yet he harbors this deep, lifelong obsession with drawing military aircraft. As we unpack his cinematic universe today, keep this duality in the back of your mind. It is absolutely the engine that drives so much of the tension in its work. To truly understand where that contradiction comes from, we have to look at his youth, and it's pretty dark. He once made this devastating admission, saying he felt the need to apologize for his existence and that he had literally zero pleasant memories from his childhood. Just let that sink in. Why would someone who creates such wondrous, joyous art carry such an incredibly heavy burden?
Section 1, Guilt in the Family Business. Let's see where it all started.
A huge chunk of his complex guilt actually originates with his family's wartime business. Born in Tokyo in 1941, little Hayao's early life was completely overshadowed by World War II. His father, Katsuji, ran a company called Miyazaki Airplane, and they didn't just make civilian planes. They actively profited from manufacturing steering wheels for deadly WWI fighter jets. Hayao loved the sky and drew planes constantly, but he quickly developed this profound shame knowing his family's wealth was tied to death machines. Because of the war, his family was constantly uprooted to avoid American attacks. This all culminated in a horrific event in July of 1945. An aerial bombardment hit the city of Utsunomiya so fiercely that half the houses were destroyed, leaving 49,000 people homeless. A young Miyazaki watched this panic unfold, seeing bright flames just completely engulfing homes. If you're a fan of his work, you've definitely seen this haunting visual mirrored directly in the intense firebombing scenes of The Boy and the Heron and Howl's Moving Castle. So here's where the survivor's guilt really takes root. Because the aviation business thrived during the war, the Miyazaki family lived in relative comfort while everyone else around them starved and suffered. That fact seeded immense guilt in him. Looking at this as a film critic, it's so clear that this love-shame relationship with the sky manifests visibly in all his directorial works. I mean, think about it. You always see flying creatures and strange, destructive airborne machines in his movies, like those terrifying insectoid bombers descending in Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. They're gorgeous, but they're terrifying. It's a direct cinematic reflection of his family's business.
Section 2, A Father's Shameful Legacy.
This survivor's guilt was heavily compounded by some pretty intense resentment toward his father. Katsuji wasn't exactly a role model. He was a self-proclaimed playboy who shamelessly bribed officials to sell low-quality aircraft parts to the military, and he had zero remorse for profiting off the war. Talk about a stark contrast, right? Hayao felt such agonizing shame over this corrupted wealth that when he got to university, he temporarily embraced Marxist ideology. He was just desperate to distance himself from his father's capitalist profiteering. Their home offered absolutely no emotional security. It was incredibly dysfunctional. Just imagine you're a sensitive teenager and your father boasts to you, "When I was your age, I already paid for geisha girls." Yikes. It's really no wonder Miyazaki later noted that at his father's funeral, everyone in attendance basically agreed the man had never said a single inspiring thing in his entire life.
Section 3, The Bedridden Matriarch.
While his father was a source of shame, his mother, Yoshiko, exerted a profoundly different yet equally heavy influence on his cinematic universe. When Hayao was just 6 years old, a devastating blow hit the family. She contracted spinal tuberculosis. This left her bedridden for 8 agonizing years. With a dad who was either working or out partying, the young boys had to step up and manage the household chores. 10-year-old Hayao had to learn how to cook, iron, clean, and heat the bathhouse. Sound familiar? That dynamic is perfectly captured in My Neighbor Totoro when young Satsuki expertly prepares the family bento boxes. Now, despite her severe illness, Yoshiko was an incredibly strict and resilient woman. She didn't coddle her kids. Actually, she famously declared that people are hopeless. She rarely praised her children and ruled the house with a total iron will. Miyazaki himself recalled that none of her 4 boys ever dared to oppose her. This right here brilliantly illustrates the direct line from his childhood trauma to his art. We see it everywhere. That heartbreaking scene where Satsuki breaks down crying to Granny, terrified that her mother is going to die in Totoro, that is a direct, incredibly vulnerable reference to his own childhood fears. And then there's the unsentimental pirate matriarch Dola, barking orders while tearing into a lobster in Laputa, Castle in the Sky. That's totally a manifestation of his tough-as-nails mother. He once said he believes a woman is just as capable of being a hero as any man, and for sure that belief was forged right at the bedside of his strong-willed mom.
Section 4. Escaping through animation.
So, caught between a profiteering father and a bedridden, ultra-strict mother, Miyazaki desperately needed an escape. As a physically weak, shy boy who was always getting into fights with the ever-changing maids in this loveless house, he survived by retreating into his drawings. He drew battleships and planes, which actually earned him the respect of the other kids. But the real tragedy is that as he grew older, he realized the sailors he had heroically sketched had actually desperately wanted to live but were forced to die in vain. His whole perspective shifted when he saw Japan's first color animated film, The White Snake Enchantress. It moved him to literal sobs and completely cemented his path in life. Throwing himself entirely into his craft, he embarked on this incredibly grueling climb up the industry ladder. He started at the absolute bottom, as a lowly, in-between artist at Toei Animation back in 1963. But his fierce, relentless persistence stunned his colleagues. He kept climbing, through scene design into key animation, until he finally became a visionary feature film director with Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro. He literally flipped the script on the main character, turning Lupin from a depraved criminal into a brave hero fighting a suffocating society. But, and here's where our critical lens reveals a really tough truth, this massive artistic success came at an incredibly steep familial cost. To create this art, he had to make a sacrifice, and tragically, that sacrifice was his own family. It's a genuinely heartbreaking irony. In 1965, he married Akemi Ota, who was a fellow animator. Get this, she was actually more recognized than him at the time, and even had a higher salary. They promised each other they'd both keep working after having their 2 sons. But during the brutal production of Lupin III, Miyazaki's schedule was so extreme he spent nights sleeping at the studio and weekends exhausted in bed. He essentially became an absent father. And because Japan's patriarchal system at the time didn't support a working mother with an absent husband, he had to break his promise. He asked Akemi to stay home. She sacrificed her promising career for his, a sacrifice she reportedly never forgave him for. He deeply resented his father for being a playboy who wasn't there for his family. And yet, Miyazaki's own relentless, all-consuming drive to create art made him absent to his own sons, Goro and Keisuke. So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Did Miyazaki, in his desperate, lifelong drive to escape his father's shameful legacy through breathtaking art, simply end up repeating the cycle of paternal absence in his own home? Thank you so much for exploring this complex history with me today. Keep these incredible contradictions in mind the next time you sit down to watch one of his masterpieces.